Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will proclaim your praise. Come, Holy Spirit, teach us your word. Teach us to come and be with you, and to enter into your word in the scriptures, and so to learn more about you and who you are, and coming from the scriptures to make our lives in more conformity with you, and to smash any idols that we may be having, or that we may have advertently or inadvertently sworn ourselves to, instead of coming to you and to your church. Amen. So I am out at night in my neighborhood, and we're going to talk about Egypt. I mean, you know the story of Exodus. Moses. Well, the Israelites are enslaved for like a couple hundred years. This is right after Genesis was over, and they're slaves, and they keep crying out to God. The Israelites end up getting way too overpopulated for the Pharaoh's liking. He's worried that they're going to rise up and have a rebellion against him. So he goes and has this brilliant idea of murdering all the babies. And obviously that's it's foreshadowing of when Herod does that to get rid of Jesus. But anyway, one of the babies gets, his mom sort of smartly puts him in a basket in the river, and then the baby is rescued out of the river by the queen of Egypt and raised as a son by her, or not the queen, but like one of her. Moses is who it is, and he grows up like in the palace of Egypt, and of the Pharaoh and everything, and he knows the Pharaoh. You can watch the movie The Prince of Egypt for all this, but he ends up killing a dude because he was mistreating a slave, and then and then he goes into exile. He meets up with the Midians, and he just lives as a shepherd for almost the rest of his life, basically. So when he's like 80, he meets the burning bush, and in the burning bush, God, reveals himself to him and stuff, and tells him that he needs to go and free the Israelites. And then he goes to Pharaoh and says, "Let them go," and Pharaoh says no, and then he does a whole bunch of plagues on them until Pharaoh lets them go. And then they cross the Red Sea and stuff. And it's a very rich book. You should definitely read it, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens after they escape too, that reveals human condition. We're not going to get into all that in the Bible study, but our study is about the apocalypse. So let's look at the plagues. We're going to look at the first 9 today, and then next time we'll look at the last one, because I think that one's a little bit more special. All right, so go ahead and read. It's a little bit longer of a read, but it's only like 3 pages, so you'll be okay. It's Exodus chapter 7, verse 8 through 10, verse 29. So all the way through chapter 10. And so you should, that should take you through all 9 of the first, or the first 9 plagues. So you can go ahead and pause and then read that. So I'm just going to buzz real quick through a couple of things that I thought were interesting that you might want to be attentive to. And of course also in the group chat, most certainly post some other stuff that you might have noticed and realized in this. There's a lot of rich things. You can post analogies to Jesus in there. There's plenty of those. Like the 3 days in darkness, that's an analogy to Jesus' death, or any spiritual truths you realized, but I'm just going to blow through a couple of them. So when you look at the gnats, this is the first time the Egyptian priests, the Egyptian wizards, can't replicate the plagues. They were able to replicate God's other things, but they couldn't for this one, and that's kind of important. You know, the Egyptians were using dark magic, which actually as Catholics we believe in. We believe in dark magic. You know, you can force demons to do things for you. But that's a sin, and that's actually a really bad sin, and you basically sell your soul. So don't do that. But God is more powerful than that, and it just goes to show, like, it seems kind of unrealistic nowadays, but like that a miracle would actually convince a non-believer. But that's just an interesting thing, is like these plagues were convincing. Like they were so powerful that they showcased God's glory. That was another thing, is like, if you look at the language, especially in reference to the hailstorm, like it just shows like how amazing and like powerful God is, and it's like I just think that's really cool language. You'll also notice that it makes it very clear that the Israelites are distinguished from the Egyptians. So and it says it literally right there, Israelites are distinguished from the Egyptians, and it says and so like the Israelites aren't affected by the plagues in the same way the Egyptians are. But the first time that this is really drawn attention to is in the flies. And so flies are a symbol of death, you know. That is, flies are sort of what buzzes around the body of a corpse. So it's like the Egyptians are actually like already dead. They're dead bodies, and they're just decaying, which is interesting. And it's sort of a reference to baptism, you know. The Israelites are set apart, like you're set apart by your baptism. The Israelites are set apart by God, and saved out of the death that is sort of like standard for the rest of the world. And then finally, before we get into my main sort of theme, I just liked the moment when the boils were so bad that they prevented the evil wizards, the Egyptian priests, from even being able to try and do their magic. So this is basically God literally giving Pharaoh a chance. Like, God's literally right there removing temptation. He's saying, like, you know, I know, Pharaoh, you're looking for evidence that God isn't real, or that the Egyptian gods are better, and I'm gonna take away that even the situation for your sin, you know, because it is a sin to try and convince yourself that God isn't real, or that God's not powerful or something. And so God's actually taking mercy on Pharaoh right there to say, like, no, it's okay, like, don't even worry about that. So that's interesting. So now here's the main thing about this that I want to focus on. And I mean, there's a lot of different things you could focus on, but this is what I want to look at. And I want to compare this to sort of this theme in this other story that I'm about to tell you. It's a brief one. It's not in the Bible, but it is I believe it's a Jewish story, a traditional Jewish story. And it's about Abraham. So before Abraham received the call from God to go and, you know, do whatever it was that Abraham did, he lived in the city of Ur, which is in Mesopotamia, and his father was a shop owner, and at the shop they sold idols, like pagan idols. And the story goes basically that Abraham, or at the time Abram, goes and he with a hammer and smashes all of the idols in his dad's shop. So I want to look at how God is doing that to the Egyptians, because, like, you know, ancient Egypt is a pagan culture and everything. That's like one of the big things about ancient Egypt. That's why a lot of people are interested in it, is because of all the cool gods. So let's look at that. So there's some very overt things in there. First of all, is like the frogs, for example, are the Egyptian goddess Hekwet. She's a frog, and she's also the goddess of fertility and sex, or she's one of several goddesses of fertility and sex and stuff, but she's one of them. And like it's like a really gross image with the frogs. Like, they're everywhere. You're gonna step on them. They're in your kneading bowls, so it sort of implies that you end up accidentally crushing them with your hands too. So the Egyptians are literally forced to stomp on their their god, and like that particular god, the sex god. So that's interesting. Also, the Nile itself was a really significant piece of Egyptian worship, and then it turns to blood, as if God is saying, your God is dead, and it's me now. So all these idols are getting crushed, like the frogs are getting stomped under your feet. And also when the plague of frogs goes away, there's like this gross image of them, like just a whole bunch of dead frogs all over the place, and they have to burn them, and the land stinks and everything. And it's like a really interesting sort of idea of sort of the effects of lust in us, but like also these other idols which are like less pagan idols. I mean, they are pagan idols, but they're also idols that we have, like sex, for example. Like a lot of people revolve their lives around sex, or like in the blood Nile, it also says that the Egyptians had to dig around the Nile because they couldn't drink the Nile water, so they had to dig. So it was a lot less convenient, and they had to toil and labor. And if you look at Genesis chapter 3 verse 17, toil is one of the effects of the fall. That's one of the punishments God gave us. And because the Egyptians are turning away from God, they are receiving a greater effect of the fall. They have to toil. That toil is also emphasized in when the livestock are killed, because the livestock are both the cattle which they eat, but also they're labor animals like donkeys and camels and stuff. So they have to do, like, they have to plow instead of with a horse plowing for them. They have to plow with their own bodies. So it's like this idol of like comfort and convenience is being smashed by the plagues. Also with the livestock dying, it's this idol of power and dominion. You have power over, first of all, over animals, because God gave you that power, but that power is like a privilege. It's not a right, and so those are being taken away. So like your ability to command might be an idol. You might be like seeking authority and stuff, and God's smashing that there with the plague of hail. God is specifically telling everyone that they need to take shelter. And they couldn't leave their homes. And this was similar to the plague of darkness as well. The 9th plague is people couldn't leave their homes and they couldn't see each other. So this idol of sort of freedom, we value our freedom often above all else, which is interesting. That's one of the objections people have to Catholicism too, is they say like there's so many rules and stuff, and it's this sort of this independence, like I can go and I can do whatever I want, but the hail there is saying like, no, you actually can't. You got to stay inside. And then the darkness is also saying, like it literally says in the plague of darkness, they couldn't see each other. So it's like that idol of I deserve my relationships with other people, which relationships with other people are good things. Many of these things are good things. Power is a good thing, and sex is a good thing, and convenience is a good thing. But when these become the most important thing in our life, it's bad, and God can take that away and say, no, this isn't me, and you're treating it like it's me. So God is. He's taking this idol and he's smashing it. He's saying, look, I am bigger than this, and this needs to be, your life is for me. It's not for you, and it's not for these stupid things like pleasure and power. And also an interesting thing about the locusts in this idol smashing piece is the locusts are, it says that the locusts eat up all their reserves that they had saved from the hail. So the hail destroyed all their crops. But maybe some of the smarter Egyptians, when they heard that they had to go inside because of the hail, they took some of their crops inside with them too, so that didn't get eaten. So they sort of thought that they were prepared, and then the locusts come and they eat up that too. So they were prepared. And how often do we do this? Is that we prepare for the future, and often there's a lot of times where we oh, I'm not going to go to mass today because because I need to study, because if I don't study, I won't set myself up for the future, right? And so like a lot of these people, you know, make an idol about being prepared and being ready, you know, and it's like prideful to think like, you know, God won't provide for me. You know, we're fully reliant on God, and if we just sort of realized that, and we let ourselves trust God, then it'd be better. But like oftentimes we and the Egyptians too are taking their idols, and you know, this idol particularly of I am prepared, you know, I can save myself, is, you know, God is saying I'm bigger than that too. So that's all I have on that. But there's just one last thing I want to bring up, and that is this sort of constant reminder that God is hardening Pharaoh's heart. And that's an interesting thing, because you know, a lot of people object to this, because first of all, it's like, okay, so first of all, so does that mean Pharaoh doesn't have free will? God's making him do this. Second of all, it seems like God wants these plagues to happen if he's making it so that Pharaoh won't do anything unless they have the plagues. And that's partly true. That's actually because, like, God says, you know, I am trying to show you my glory. So that is partly intentional. But then also it's like, okay, Pharaoh's one might say, okay, Pharaoh's not the bad guy here, because it's like God's the bad guy, because God is making him need this to happen, and like God's making Pharaoh keep the Israelites. And I saw a really good analogy of this. This was a statement in a reflection during the Exodus 90 exercise, and the statement was this: that it's not that it's not that God is looking at Pharaoh and taking him and like turning a switch in his brain that makes his heart hard. In like, for example, chapter 10 verse 20, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, so that Pharaoh would not let the Israelites go. Exodus 90 says that well, it's, if God's making Pharaoh do this in the same way that like the sun makes clay hard or ice melt. You know, if you put ice out on the sidewalk and you put some clay out on the sidewalk, the sun shines on both of them the same, but the sun's going to melt the ice, and you want to be like the ice. You want the sun to change your heart in a good way. You want it to sort of to make it melt with love. But the clay, and you choose to be like the ice or like the clay, but the clay gets hardened by the sun. You know, the sun warms the clay, and it makes it stiff and hard and brittle. So that's your choice. So I know there was a lot in there, and there were a lot of different directions we could have gone in. But I want to focus on this idol thing. So this chapter sort of presents us with a list of idols. You know, sex, pleasure, convenience. The boils and the gnats are like comfort. You know, because they make your body itch and stuff, or you know, your relationships with other people, or your freedom. So we're going to talk a lot this week about you know, what idols do we have, what idols do we not realize that we have, and what are we giving over to God. And it's also really interesting in this time of the coronavirus and all this uncertainty in the world and stuff, is like, you know, God's kind of doing this to us again, and he's saying like, where are your priorities, you know? And that's something we do in Lent too, is we sort of get rid of these things that are good and that are nice for us, so that we can learn we can learn how to make like better priorities for ourselves. So that's all I have for now. God bless you, and I hope to see a good conversation. The discussion questions are in the description of this video, as well as I'll send it to the group. Bye.